You guys.
Hey, how's it going?
Oh. You want to redo it?
We're gonna have to unplug the recorder.
No, that's gonna be mildly amusing.
Really?
Nothing?
Oh, wait,
Okay.
right here. I don't know if it'll fit, but. Oh, yes. You know what?
Nothing up top.
Ben,
Hey, how you doing, Tim?
I'm doing well. But yourself?
I'm alive and breathing.
That's good news.
Today.
What is the red?
Oh.
What is the red line? Wait, here it is. It's proposed
isn't it?
streetscape.
4, 5, 6.
And don't worry, I've added animations to it, so.
Oh, good. I'm gonna see these.
Excellent. Hello.
Boy, got everybody tonight.
Just are killing me. Hey, good evening. Good. How are you doing?
Oh, man.
Good.
David changes MOS.
And yet,
Yeah, we're here.
very fine day.
So when you go to
Evening.
Evening. God, I gotta sit down for just like 2 minutes in between things today.
Yes.
Out on the
check everybody out,
back patio and feel the leaves turning color, and there's that autumn
It's
light
not-
that's really soft. It's like
Hayden offered us
I like autumn.
Favorite.
Oh,
to go to.
it's nice out. It's like nice enough you can work outside and
Yes.
feel good, not be like
Hunson's course.
crushing heat.
Yes, absolutely.
He's one of the 3 of the 6 that accepted.
Workout.
Oh,
So he'll stay at Camp Pendleton. He'll be there for another 5 or 6 weeks. He's basically gonna swim in the ocean and run all day for like 5 or 6 weeks, and then he will transition to, there's an initial course that's like 5 weeks long. After that, they assess you, you go to selection, and then you get an opportunity to go to BRC. So if he passes all that, then BRC is like 12 weeks, but you go to dive school with the teams down at Coronado. Like, yeah, you learn to jump out of planes. You
Feels very different than what he
very
was doing
different
before.
than
And what he just talked about.
and he broke the news to Annie on Saturday. She was very happy and very proud of him. And she just wanted to caution him about like, because Andrew
Definitely thought you were hitting a vape pen for a second.
has always
I was like, oh,
oh, that sounds good. I could go for some of that.
no,
No.
thought this was going, but good for you.
that in the army.
Hey,
I have what's that meme? We got 99 problems, but vaping ain't one of them.
I don't think you should tell your brother yet.
Impact other, yeah. Oh, that's wild.
So yeah,
Very different than what.
that's not a supply job.
Yeah, exactly. That was London.
Oh, dude, that was such a whirlwind.
Yeah. It was a wedding?
Mhm. Yeah, apparently our friend married into a very influential family in Nigeria.
Oh, interesting.
So we kind of got the lowdown on that.
Nice. That depends on who's in power in Nigeria.
Not with this family.
Which tribe?
They're from like the most prominent, they've been consistently making decisions for decades. Yeah, it's a little bit concerning, but. Ay.
Anything in Nigeria is fluid.
Oh, absolutely.
It's just
Africa in general is very,
yeah, but Nigeria in particular, especially after Biafra and all that.
yeah.
Thank you, Paula.
Ah, teacher's bad.
That's right. Why do you get all the,
Did she annotate the labels and
I-
such for you too?
Did not request that, but she did. And she's amazing.
Oh, I take special.
She takes special requests, special orders.
Good job.
You did. What did he change to?
Very right. In turn from what he signed up to do.
Didn't know you
oh,
could do that.
she's here.
Yeah, the recon guys come through to recruit when kids go to the school infantry. So they offered 6 kids the chance to. Recently, only 3 optioned it. Dave is one of the 3.
What does that mean?
And swim some more in the ocean.
See Marie?
I've
I've
Well, thank you.
in like
You got half me, half
He's
my
on the
sister. I
path
guess
now.
that's pretty close.
Hey, that's good.
once he's an NCO, once he's an E4, like you can put an application in to go to selection for MARSOC. Marine Corps Special Operations Command.
slightly different than supply, which is his first.
Yeah, the guys we work with at work.
Has anybody told his mother this?
He told Annie this.
Okay.
Good. Do I house to nothing?
I just keep smiling and nodding. I'm just like, you know, it's their life.
At first I thought it was, you didn't have a gavel, you just had the mouse.
Yeah. If
Click,
you
click,
said something,
click,
it would be
click.
the wrong thing to
Order,
say.
order.
Yeah, we're being
be
very
so
supportive of
First street in the history.
it. She's
Yeah.
like it, but
Doesn't mean you like it, right? Yeah.
Well, I
Fire of
meeting, I
1891
got
in the Dalles.
out of session, and then the mayor came back in because he had to
In the Great
read
Flood of 1894.
session. I was like, okay, we're really done. One more minute. Is Scott online already? Yes. Perfect. Okay.
You want to make sure I get on camera, huh? Because I'm so good looking.
Yeah.
Want to stay on my good side.
Well, is that the
Kristen.
person usually on the other side of it? So,
Walter, I don't know.
Tim?
Bud Carpenter.
Well, it's just full.
Only good side is straight ahead. Eye to eye.
Look over there, that camera makes it look like I have a bald spot.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So, you know, you can hear.
Yeah, I don't like looking at it because my white hair just glows on the camera.
does Todd want?
Thank you. That's
Sure.
very helpful, actually.
Mm-mm.
I let Dan know last week.
All right, now that we've done the shuffle, let's call the special meeting of the, oh, sorry. Yep. Let's call the special meeting of the Columbia Gateway Urban Renewal Agency Board meeting of October 21st, 2024 to order at 5:31. Paula, will you please call the roll?
Tracy Coburn,
Here.
Walter Denstedt,
Here.
Scott Hagee is absent. Kristen Littlevick.
Here.
Darcy Long,
Here.
Timothy McLaughlin.
Here.
Dan Richardson,
Here.
Marcus Swift.
Here.
And Ray.
Here.
If everyone who's able will please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before you, the agenda. Are there any additions or changes? Staff? Nope. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll move approval of the agenda as presented.
Board Member Coburn moved approval of the agenda. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Board Member Richardson seconded the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Next on the agenda is the approval of the September 17th, 2024 minutes. Are there any corrections or additions?
Yeah, one quick question,
Yes.
Chair Long. It is on, let me find it. My apologies here. It is on page 6, right under board member comments and questions. Board member Richardson noted that 3 city councilors are part of the ad hoc committee. It's actually only 1 city councilor, so this should have been 3 board members effectively. So that was the only change we saw.
Okay, great.
Which there are actually 4 of us on that committee, just to be clear.
Okay, yeah, so we'll just scratch this to say noted that 4 urban renewal board members are part of the ad hoc committee rather than 3 city councilors. So that'll be the only correction there.
Okay, thank you.
Josh, it's Jonathan. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
If we're talking about correcting the minutes to reflect, what Councilor Richardson's intent was when he mentioned that, if he said 3, the minutes should reflect that he said 3, whether they're councilors or board members. I think that's a great point that you flagged. But if there are 4, that's okay. It's just that what he said during the meeting and what the minutes need to reflect it's just an accurate, capturing of what he said. He said 3, so the minutes should say 3 is my recommendation.
Yeah, so it can say just 3 members. He did not say, I watched the video, he did not say city councilors.
Yeah, that's fine. Just
yeah.
I meant like not making it say 4.
Yeah,
even
that's
though
fine.
there are 4. Okay.
So what is the proper procedure if something's going to give people the wrong impression from the minutes?
That's a great question, Councilor Long. There are some opportunities to include like a footnote in the minutes to correct, potential misconceptions that are very likely to stem from, if people want to take what is said during a meeting as a fact, you certainly can. With that said, the point of minutes and what our obligations are under the public meetings law is just to ensure that the minutes themselves are an accurate reflection of what was actually said at the meeting and who it was said by. And so there is an opportunity to have a footnote in the minutes saying, actually it's 4 members or whatever the case may be. And I can look into what the best way to do that would be. It might actually even be easier not to adopt these minutes here tonight if that's a point that you'd like to focus in on. Once they're adopted, it becomes a little bit trickier.
Chair,
Yes, Councilor.
if we merely put in brackets or in parentheses, the word other after 3 other board members, I think we'll both be accurate and capture my intent appropriately.
Did you hear that, Councilor Cara?
Yes, yes, that would be just fine.
Is that what you'd like to do since it was your quote?
Yes, please.
Okay, so he wants to put other in parentheses after 3 so that it makes it more clear.
3 other board members?
Yes. And other goes in parentheses, yes. Yeah, it's probably a good idea to look it up and decide formally what's the appropriate way to accurately represent that for all city meetings. I would think that because so many times people are reading the minutes and they're not necessarily reading every meeting to look for corrections to minutes, it's best to do some kind of footnote or other procedure. But if you would look that up and please let the city council know, I would appreciate that.
I will let the city council and the urban renewal agency board know. I have
Thank you.
just candidly, I have some ideas and I've looked into this before in the last year or so, in fact. It's rather convoluted. I don't want to misspeak here. I'll send it in an email to everybody in the next few days.
Wonderful. We just want public transparency. That's been a big theme. So let's make it easy for people.
Certainly.
Thank you. Any other corrections or additions to the minutes? Okay, so with that noted correction, all in favor, please say, oh, I'm sorry, I don't even have a motion. I tried. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as corrected?
I so move.
Thank you, Counselor Richardson. Is there a second?
McLaughlin will second.
Thank you, Counselor McLaughlin. All in favor of approving the minutes as approved, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Yes. Oh, 2 abstentions?
Abstentions. Wasn't present for the meeting.
Thank you for drawing the attention to that. During this portion of the meeting, anyone may speak on any urban renewal subject. 5 minutes per person will be allowed. Is there anyone who would like to speak to the urban renewal board? I don't see anyone online either. Okay. Yes.
Thank you. You all have a printout of a letter we received today from Todd regarding the, he would like to have that entered into the record. He's not able to be here tonight.
Okay, from Todd Carpenter.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is our discussion item, First Street Project, Agency and City Project Cost Discussion.
Thank you. Chair Long, members of the board, Joshua Chandler, Urban Renewal Manager. This next item here regarding the First Street project, we've talked about it a few times this last year. We wanted to bring something in front of you at the request at the last board meeting. And this is really taking a look at a project cost discussion that the city and agency staff have had over the past few months. So I provided in here in our staff report, we've touched on a lot of the history around First Street, but really, First Street, to kind of emphasize it enough, First Street really used to be a main corridor in the Dalles. The 19th, 20th century, a lot of key points of the Dalles are along First Street. We saw really a disconnection of First Street as the main corridor, really with the interstate was kind of the final point in that, and really a lot of that shifted over. The corridor really shifted over to Second and Third Street. So in that period of time, all the history that's passed, First Street has seen quite the deterioration of conditions. I don't know if you've been out there recently to take a look at the conditions. It's in pretty poor shape. This is really due to its 19th century construction and years of neglect. There's sections that we've talked about in past discussions, the sidewalks that are settling, sidewalks that are actually sinking into the ground due to the infrastructure that they're built on, some elevated sidewalk areas. The 2009 Urban Renewal Plan called out First Street as a streetscaping project. First Street, Second, Third, and Fourth were called out as streetscaping projects. Second Street occurred in the early 2000s, and then the First Street has actually been discussed now for quite a few years. This project has received funding, federal funding, through a grant with ODOT. The city brought on the consultant that we're still using today, KPFF Consulting Engineers, in 2009. And at that time, the project was known as the Riverfront Connection Project. And I have a map in front of you. If you look at the map, I'll get into our slides a little bit, but the first map is kind of like a pencil sketching. This is really looking back at the constraints and opportunities of First Street. Like I said, I'll share some slide for those on the screen and those in the audience here as I finalize this reading up of this staff report. Despite receiving many of these grant funds, the escalating price of this project really put it once again on the back burner, and the project was officially put on hold in March 2016. There was some work done between 2016 and 2022, really trying to restart the project. And in 2022, KPFF alerted the city that actually the project could be done quicker and at a cost savings to the city due to not needing to follow federal permitting requirements. So back in 2022, this is winter 2022, I believe it was November, KPFF and ODOT agreed to terminate this agreement that we had with them, and in turn, saving the city $821,000, but the city would then be required to pay back all federally expended funds. Following that decision, though, ODOT submitted an exception on behalf of the city of the Dalles, so therefore the $320,000 that was spent of those federal funds did not have to be repaid. To date, the city and the agency have dedicated about $3.8 million, and this is saved in the city's Fund 18. This is separate from an urban renewal account entirely. These funds are separate and augment any urban renewal contribution to the project. Today, KPFF continues to work with staff and meet with their engineers on a weekly basis to try to get this project over the line. This project will fulfill an urban renewal obligation from that 2009 plan, and which specified, as I mentioned earlier, streetscaping along First Street as a bonded obligation. It would also ensure that this multi-year project moves past the finish line, a project that has been, that we've spent about $1.5 million on designing and engineering, and in talking to our engineers, that is far and above way more than you should be spending on a design and engineer of a project this size. But mostly that money is the result of continuous scoping changes since the very beginning of the project. The current estimate is about $7 million, and this is from reconstruction of Union Street to Laughlin Street. This scope here is one of the many reductions. As I talked about earlier, the Riverfront Connection Project was a very elaborate design streetscaping project, which you can see on that pencil drawing I showed you. You can see there's that connection, the pedestrian connection was a connection that was from a sunken plaza on Washington Street. So of course that went away, and we have the scope that we have now, which is just an above grade, aside from the infrastructure improvements that would be below that streetscaping. So in an effort to reduce cost, staff has engaged with KPFF, and this was something we discussed back in June, looking at different scopes to the project, scoping it down, looking at different alternatives to try to save this project, to try to save some more money on this project. This would be similar to, and also in talking with the city to try to offset some of these costs. This would be similar to the Second Street reconstruction project, which was actually initially funded by the agency, but there were some change orders that resulted in city assisting in about 1/3 of that total project cost. As I mentioned at the beginning, during this last year, the agency board has engaged in extensive discussions regarding the overall cost and the commitment to this project. And in itself, this project has diverged quite a bit from the original Riverfront Connection project. This new focus prioritizes essential repairs and replacements over that initial very elaborate plan. And then with the reduced spending authority that we've also been discussing of about approximately $2.2 million, the agency has sought for a level of commitment from the city similar to that was provided with the Second Street reconstruction project. So at the last meeting, I mentioned that Public Works engineering staff took a look at the scope that was provided to try to determine between infrastructure and streetscaping. More thorough explanation of that would be provided by our Public Works director. Unfortunately, he was out ill, unable to make it today. But I think we have a pretty good representative from the city with the city manager. He'll speak to this here in a little bit. Attachment 2, you will find a memo from the Public Works director that's kind of talking about where they came up, how they got to the numbers that I mentioned the last time we were meeting. So in looking at the infrastructure cost from this analysis on attachment 1, the breakdown was that about that their team determined about $708,000 of this project would be infrastructure costs compared to $4.1 million for streetscaping. And if you put those two together, of course, it doesn't come up to $7 million. But we did not include in that breakdown any of those incidentals that always occur with any projects. We're talking mobilizing, right-of-way acquisitions, archaeological. All those are just incidental of the project itself, so not really something looking at infrastructure or streetscaping. So that was left out. Historically, this project has been managed by the agency. It's a project that the Urban Renewal Agency manager oversees with assistance from Public Works, but it has been handled by the agency. And as such, the city does not have any funds allocated to support this project. Consequently, any potential contributions from the city could impact other larger projects, infrastructure need around the community, including multi-million-dollar projects outlined in the city's master plan, which is set for adoption in 2025, as well as the replacement of the 6th Street Bridge, which is something that is located inside the district. This we will find out more. Dan is going to touch on that a little bit, but there is more of an immediate need to replace the 6th Street Bridge. So that is one of the constraints that the city funds that the city would need to focus on rather than allocating it toward the First Street project. As I mentioned, further context on how engineering came up with these numbers is included in attachment 2, as well as just kind of a breakdown to show really what a project like this, the typical layout of a project like this. There's a lot of things that go into these streetscaping projects. For instance, projects like this typically are covered with grants, reimbursement districts, local improvement districts, some type of property owner contributions. All those things are not part of this project. This is all something that has been set as being funded by the agency. There's no board alternatives. This is just really just a discussion item for the agency board to have an opportunity to talk to representatives from the city on this. And then I also just wanted to go in really quick and show you, kind of walk you through these slides that I provided for you to give you an idea. This first, as I mentioned, we've been talking about this for a while. So this first slide is the initial sketch that was put together looking at opportunities and constraints. And as you can see, kind of in the central part of this right here, that was going to be the pedestrian and the bike connection to the river. This was a sunken plaza, very elaborate. There was actually 3 different alternatives looked at for streetscaping, but this was the initial brainstorm, figuring out how they came up with the different alternatives. And you can see a lot of these things the city and the agency have followed through on. So it's kind of neat to look back and see that these things, this was back from June 2005, so 19 years ago. So there's definitely a vision that the city and the agency has moved forward with. It just doesn't follow one that included this sunken plaza. And staff does believe, it's our opinion that this First Street project is still very much in the spirit of the riverfront connection. So I'm going to walk through a little bit here. The area in red is the First Street streetscaping, the scope of work. As you can see, this is from Union to Laughlin Street, and then half a block down. That area, looking at the other, we just threw out some destination points here. These aren't all the agency projects in this area, but we just kind of wanted to show you an idea of some of those bigger projects that have occurred in just a few blocks of the First Street. That they're really, when you look at it as holistically, you're going to see that this isn't a random street that was just selected to be improved. It's very much part of a larger vision, that vision that was outlined in early 2000s. My apologies, there's a star at the bottom. It says Civic Auditorium, but that's just kind of, looks like it was cut off this screen. So in here you see this blue, which is the existing streetscape. The biggest portion of it is the Second Street streetscaping project. That was a project that went really the extent of our downtown, and it stopped right about Lincoln Street. As you can see, a little dashed line that goes off to the Thompson Park sidewalk. That's an area that doesn't have full streetscaping, but it does have sidewalks on each side of the road. So it definitely allows for pedestrian connectivity all the way through town. The streetscaping project, similar to the Second Street project, similar to the First Street project, not only was on Second Street, but it also extends into the half a block to the north and half a block to the south. This was also incorporated into like our pilot streetscaping project, which was the project right here on Federal Street. So Federal Street was the very first streetscaping that was done. This was done pre-2000s, and it kind of gave us the test of what it was going to be. That's when we first had the planter strips and the trees planted. So as you can see, some of our more established trees are on the Federal Street run here, but it's that connection that goes all the way up to the Civic Auditorium. And then the section over here, you can see this was really kind of incidental with the development of the Maritime Terminal, the Union Street undercrossing, and Lewis and Clark Park. So this is all streetscaping with that definition of planter strips, landscaping on each side, bike lanes, things of that nature. And then one step, looking again and how this connects us to the river, well, we have the Riverfront Trail. Of course, it's just a one-of-a-kind trail that we have. This connects you all the way out to, the Columbia Gorge Discovery Center. And that is a connection, that is completed with that you can now connect into with the streetscaping shown here in blue. And it's also something that will connect right into the system on First Street. And then the bottom left-hand corner, you see the Mill Creek Greenway, which is another agency-sponsored project. Spoke to the executive director of the parks today. They are actually working with there's some negotiations going on right now as far as finalizing the overall cost of that project to move forward with design and engineering. And then a last addition here, two more, I guess. This shows how the Federal Street Plaza and the Tony site really kind of plays into that. It leads right in, as I talked about. There's the streetscaping. You go from the Civic Auditorium, you can walk through the Federal Street Plaza, connect through this finished First Street streetscape. You can go all the way out to the dock. So we're going to be, we're definitely open for tourism here in the Dalles, so people can walk right through this fully, soon to be fully finished streetscaping area in these couple blocks in our downtown. And then the last is one I just threw out there that I'm not too familiar. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with this, but this is I don't even have the correct name here, but I'm just saying it's the Mill Creek Connector. And really what it is there's a swath of land right behind the post office. We've had some KPFF actually a couple years ago worked with us to put together just a very basic design on this. This is still really on the back burner and still requires significant discussions with the railroad because this is railroad right away. But we do have a significant amount of width back over there that would allow for not only a new rail to be installed in the event that the railroad were to expand, but even installing a new rail, and would have like a 15-foot wide paved bike and ped path. So this would be another extension here to the Mill Creek Greenway, and then you would connect to the rest of the system. So just wanted to say that, the First Street project, we've meandered a little bit with this project. We still, very much believe that it wasn't just a random one-off street. It's part of the larger picture. And with that, I would like to introduce the city manager, Matthew Cleaves, to add, maybe touch on the memo that was received from our public works director. As I mentioned, he's out ill, so he wasn't able to make it. And I think Matthew will be able to provide us with some, maybe the city's perspective, and maybe go into that memo a little bit further. I can keep this up. I can take the screen off, whichever you'd prefer.
Preference? Evening.
Good evening.
No.
Jonathan, can you hear me? Yeah, you can hear me. Thank you very much for having me here this evening. Some of my comments really reflect what Mr. Chandler mentioned a moment ago. I think really looking back on some of the context under which this project came into being, where it really kind of came from and how it evolved over those years. And maybe I'll speak a little bit on some of the different philosophies that one can apply with an urban renewal agency. And we've seen both of these philosophies through the life of this agency. One way that urban renewal agencies help foster urban renewal is by investing and going above and beyond when it comes to investing in public infrastructure. The infrastructure projects noted above early on in the life of the agency, I think were really meant to contribute to our community, help revitalize our downtown, and serve as an indicator to businesses in our downtown, private investment, outside businesses, that this community is investing in some of its core structure, its core bones, its core infrastructure. And urban renewal allows that to happen above and beyond what a city may be able to do with its different competing priorities, and real focus on the delivery of those core services, and help bring about some of the streetscaping elements and some of those things that are really notable and nice, frankly, for a community. And so that's one philosophy, that an agency facilitates those projects, makes them come into reality, and it serves as that foundation and indicator of investing in our own core services. The other way is agencies partner and they work with private investment. And we've seen that a number of times over the years. Both philosophies with overarchingly the same goal, which is to revitalize our downtown and grow a tax base maybe faster than it normally would have grown. That but-for argument with urban renewal. And both of those philosophies also have risks. Sometimes private investment doesn't move forward. And sometimes private investment doesn't occur after infrastructure has been invested in. And we've seen both of those dynamics over the years, past 20 years or so. And we hope to see some very positive things in the future, especially when it comes to that level of private investment. And so at the time the First Street streetscaping project really came into existence was when the agency and the city were really working on the infrastructure, those bones that we have in the downtown. And as you can see by the presentation Mr. Chandler gave a moment ago, in alignment with that overarching vision of reconnecting our community to the river. We didn't have that access, obviously. And so I think that's important to remember when a project like this comes forward. I think in terms of the length of this project, one of the things that has occurred is the city's really relied on urban renewal to carry this project forward. It's been a commitment that's been many years in the making, and the city is willing to assist in the ways that it can to help this project come into reality, as we share a lot of those same goals and that same desire to see see the downtown revitalized and to see these connections come into reality. One way is that the city has created an ad hoc committee to focus on the Federal Street Plaza. And I think it's important to build on Josh's comments a moment ago that it flows both ways. So for example, one scenario I wanted to mention is that we hope and expect a significant number of bike tourists to come visit our community with the completion of the Columbia Gorge Bike Trail. And for example, the hope is that we will have a significant bike hub at the Federal Street Plaza in alignment with bike hubs that other communities have completed in Cascade Locks, Mosier, Hood River, and that those bike tourists will come to that bike hub off of the Riverfront Trail, coming up or down Union Street, I should say, with the graphic in front of us. And they'll most likely take a left onto First Street to reach that bike hub and those amenities. They won't go against traffic, hopefully, on Second Street. And so this connector really flows both ways for community members looking to access the Riverfront Trail and the river itself, and also for visitors coming to our community. And so I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have about the memo that was included from our Public Works Director. I'll do my very best to pitch hit for him here. But I think one of the things that the city has relied upon over the years with the First Street streetscaping is we do have a significant amount of resources that the city has, but we also have significant liabilities and infrastructure debt that we need to prioritize and make sure is accomplished. And so again, here we have some resources we're willing to contribute to the First Street streetscaping project, but we are limited in certain ways. The breakout that Josh mentioned a moment ago was the Public Works attempt to really look at the elements in this project, and is a true attempt to break out what would really arguably be dedicated infrastructure for the city and what is really part of that streetscaping element. And so I think one example that comes to my mind that maybe helps capture some of the philosophy here is that when you're looking to replace a sidewalk, for example, at that surface level, you do really have to include the foundational elements below that sidewalk as part of that streetscaping project. And so that's what informed some of this breakout here. And so you'll see under, I think it was on the second page here, most notably under the water supply systems, that's an element that really landed in that infrastructure category, where some of the foundational work needed to accomplish the streetscaping element still lands under the streetscaping element and not that infrastructure piece. And I think the other thing I'd like to make clear is that this breakout represents the application of that analysis of how to break this out between infrastructure and streetscaping, but it's not representative of what the city can contribute to the project. And so just wanted to make that clear, that this was a true effort to break that out using those different philosophies.
Any questions?
Yeah, I think I'll stop there.
This is background information to inform the discussion to follow, correct?
Yes.
And a report basically where we are with this.
Well, and I think it adds some additional context as to how this breakout on agenda item 7A, attachment 1 was arrived at, which I think was part of the request the agency had, was where is this from and what was the philosophy for why one landed in one column and why something else landed in a different column.
Correct. Thank you.
And then maybe just to drive a point home too, because it was worded kind of passively, just in case anybody didn't grab it. It says the bonded obligation based on the 2009 plan. That means the bond from 2009 obligates us to do the streetscape project.
Well, I think this all boils down to is in order to make all this stuff happen, we're going to need to consider another $6.1 million added to the amount to be spent. If that isn't approved, obviously First Street's not going to get a whole lot done until some other source of revenue is found. I do believe, and I've said this many times, that water main is urgent. I think safety is a thing that's important as far as the sidewalk. But and I've said before, I have a different set of priorities than most people here. And I want to talk a little bit later about why my priorities are what they are, and maybe explain a little bit why the fire district is not wanting to forfeit any more funds. I don't think that anybody here is responsible. I don't think it's necessary to trace down why urban renewal ran short of money a lot sooner than they wanted to. They were hoping to have enough money to continue all this stuff and make the money stretch till 29. So it's unfortunate that there's not enough money to do all this stuff, but I don't see the urgency for streetscaping. Like I said, there's a couple of items I can see the urgency for. I don't know how much money is going to be available in the future. I do believe that almost every government agency in Wasco County, other than the school district, is going to benefit from the Google or the data center things going online and more tax money coming in. But later on, I want to talk more about why the fire district doesn't want to lose any funds and why my priorities are what they are.
Absolutely. Any other questions, comments?
Chair, I don't know if this is helpful, but I admit to a certain amount of heartburn for $7 million for this project. It's a lot of money. And it's a lot of money spent after a lot of money. And I was chewing on this earlier, and reminded me of when some folks we knew inherited a house, and it was a pretty rough shape house. It was, it needed lots of repairs and a new roof and all this. And it wasn't their fault, but once they had it, it was their responsibility. And I kind of feel like that's where we are. It's like this, it would have been nice had it would have been very helpful to all concerned had they been able to follow through with their plans 19 years ago or 15 years ago or 10 years ago or any number of years ago. But that didn't happen. Here we are now. It's our house, our street.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else? All right. I just want to make sure we have the, full discussion now, because the next, down here, we're going to talk about the substantial amendment and report. And so we need to, as a board agency, we need to have all our questions answered and be prepared to decide how that's going to fit in or not. Okay. All right. Looks like we're good. Next, we'll move on to item number 8, our action items. A is urban renewal plan, substantial amendment and report.
Thank you, Chair Long, Dan Spots, Economic Development Officer for the City of the Dalles. You all have just a few files that you've received in your packet. I'd like to start with the agenda staff report with the intent of kind of navigating through some of the key points in the report and some of the attachments and exhibits, because there's a lot of stuff here, and I wanted to focus on, okay, what exactly are these documents? In the course of that, I'd like to highlight a few things from the report, some key findings, and then we'll be turning this over to Elaine Howard, our consultant for urban renewal. She'll have a slide deck that will go into more of the details on some of this, especially on the fiscal side, talking in detail about some of the projects, but I'll hit some of the projects here as well. And then finally, come back and look at staff recommendation and our request for a resolution on substantial amendment. But to start, let's go from the top with the staff report and a little bit of history. I know you've all been through this a year and a half now, most of you. But as a reminder, about, well, March 2023, we knew that the plan adopted in 2009 needed to be updated. And so the initial focus was simply some housekeeping. Let's go through the plan, update some things. There are some new projects we knew were coming down the pipeline that were not reflected in that, the big one being Basalt Commons. Best practice in urban renewal is for major projects like that to be identified. So we started off with that. And in the course of that, we needed to do a fiscal analysis. How much money do we actually have? That led to some findings, frankly, that we did not have nearly as much as we had assumed. And I don't want to go into the long history of that. I think we've covered that a lot. But instead of somewhere around 10 million, we ended up at the end of the day, as of now, with about $2.2 million capacity. Maximum indebtedness being spending authority. It is not the amount that you bring in tax increment financing. You could make $50–60 million in revenue, but the spending authority is something established by City Council, and so that is the limit that you need to recognize. When I say 2.2, I'm talking not only about expenditures made, but also commitments made. Basalt Commons being one of them, not the only one. So that's kind of the preface as to bringing us to this current point. A few other things that we learned along the way over the past year of research into all of this. We learned, for instance, First Street, the bond mentioned. This was a 2009 bond that the city took out, total amount of $10 million. $2 million of that went to a local improvement district. That was not an urban renewal project. That was over off of Bargeway Road and out in the area of the grain elevators. About $8 million of it was urban renewal commitment. That was a refinancing of an earlier bond, and it was to do several things identified in the bond language. One of those being First Street streetscaping, emphasis on the word streetscaping. So the way, and it is in several legal documents, the way we read that is a legal obligation of the district to the city. And the obligation being to repay the bond and to conduct the projects noted. Other determinations we found, starting when we thought we had more money than we actually do, we did a lot of outreach to downtown businesses and identified multiple projects that would benefit from urban renewal investment. Not as big as Basalt Commons, but 12 or more projects that add up to about 3.3 million, and that's a rough calculation. I can ask you to jump way ahead in your packet, and I'm going to come back to this page a number of times in the presentation to page 148. That is the one-page summary of private investments that we've identified so far. Some of them are literally on hold right now until we resolve this issue of substantial amendment. Others are more speculative, but we know they're out there. Large vacant buildings that would definitely benefit from urban renewal investment. We've talked about First Street, and I just mentioned the prospect of private investments, private developments, and with 2.2, it puts us in a bind. We don't have enough to do everything we would like to do. So the idea of a substantial amendment is to increase the maximum indebtedness. It increases the spending authority that the agency has to invest funding. We can request of City Council an expansion of up to $6.1 million. That is a calculation based upon and beginning with the maximum indebtedness as established in 1998. There were a series of legislative findings in the history of urban renewal. Back in 1990, when the district was established, when the agency was established, there was no MI. That came down through a later legislative direction. And so we established the first MI in 1998. It was expanded again. It was changed a couple of times. It was expanded most recently in 2009. But that original MI is the beginning point, and it's a 20% increase adjusted for inflation. It gets us to the point of $6.1 million. That is the amount that we can request of City Council without the support of the tax districts. Now, our preference is to have the support of the tax districts. We could go beyond 6.1. That would require tax district support. We're not doing that. We don't see the need to do that. But we are, as you'll see later, and as you know already, going to be requesting a 6.1 increase. No new debt is incurred. This is something that I've stumbled over a number of times when we use a term like maximum indebtedness. Because when I first heard that, I thought, well, okay, what's the debt? We're incurring new debt. No, we're incurring spending authority to spend revenues that we are collecting anyway. In this case, from 2026 until 2029. 2026 is when we have sufficient tax increment revenue funding coming in to pay off the urban renewal obligation to the city. From 2026 to 2029, we will continue to collect tax increment financing, but we don't have the spending authority to spend a dime of it. 2026 is when we can actually shut down the district, shut down the agency, release TIF. At that point, we will have fulfilled the obligation to the city, but we will not have been able to do the things that we're talking about, First Street, downtown improvements. I'm going through to hit a few other key points. I talked about the fact that there's no new debt through spending authority. Another determination we found in all of this is that we can make the request for substantial amendment once and once only. And for the record, ORS 457.220, subsection 4, subsection B as in boy, spells that out. Amendments can occur only once after 2010, when a plan has been amended. Our plan was amended last in 2009, so it is only legally possible to make one substantial amendment after that, and that gets us to the termination of the district in 2029. You can't terminate, you cannot expand debt more than once. We do it on this cycle, and that's it. At that point in 2029, the district expires. You can create a new district. The agency does not necessarily expire, but the agency becomes basically a placeholder. Upon termination, all unexpended funds return to the tax districts. Questions so far?
Well, there was some question before about how much this was going to cost the different districts, and the financial person that was on the Zoom at the last meeting said, yeah, it's going to increase the cost. The money's got to come from somewhere. And so it may be in the packet that I haven't looked at yet, how much per year the fire district is going to forfeit if this goes through. And that was a number that I was looking for today.
Exactly. And Elaine will be covering that. It's in the packet. But
yeah, I figured it was. I'm sorry I didn't have time to look at it, but
is that figure 17, Dan, on page 129? Is that figure 17 on page 129, or is that a different figure? 151.
I believe it's page 151 in the packet.
Yep, there you go.
Thank you, Kristen.
And that is enough of a breakout that I want to have Elaine go over those numbers. Okay.
So it seems like what you're saying is if you don't get the $6.1 million, you can only spend approximately 2.2, but money's going to come rolling in that you can't spend.
Correct. We will collect enough TIF by 2026 to pay off the obligation. We will continue to collect TIF between 2026 and 2029, but we do not have the spending authority to use that money.
And so that money would go back.
Yeah. either in 2029 or earlier, depending upon when we close the district down.
There's no way to slow down the spending and stretch out your 2.2. It doesn't matter if you stretch it out till 2029.
You actually have interest savings if you close it down earlier. You could accelerate it, the district, but you also would accelerate the debt payments by doing so. But that is an option, accelerating the schedule. Right now, the debt schedule runs until 2029. That's something that we could accelerate.
Not sure that makes sense to me, but that's okay.
We're paying about $700,000 a year in debt service. That's the payment from the agency to the city to pay off. It's part of that 2009 bond obligation.
Okay.
So you increase that, you accelerate that, you could close it down in 2026.
Only if we have the cash to do it. And at the moment, the
We
schedule
don't.
is
You
that
have to
we
collect
don't.
TIF
We
each
have
year to be able to do
collect
that.
it.
It's a cash flow issue.
Hmm.
Okay, going on. Let's talk about the attachments on this. Exhibit A, which starts on page 20 of your agenda staff report. This is the urban renewal plan, substantial amendment. So terminology, the substantial amendment is the plan. It's an amendment to the plan. So when I say substantial amendment, when I talk about urban renewal plan, those are one and the same document. We started with the 2009 plan. We are amending it. A lot of it is typographical, minor changes, some more significant changes. And one of the things that triggers the substantial amendment is earlier this year, we went through the goals and objectives and we modified the goals and objectives. So the original ground rules back in 1990 that went along with this, as established by City Council, where any changes to the goals and objectives needed to be approved through a substantial amendment. Substantial amendment can only be made by the City Council. That's one of the trigger points. Other trigger points, expansion of the district. We are not doing that. We're making a tweak of about 4 acres that reflects an old railroad transfer that occurred a number of years ago, but we're not fundamentally modifying the district boundaries. The other thing that triggers a substantial amendment is an increase in maximum indebtedness, and that is definitely what we're asking here. And I will go into some sections of the urban renewal plan here in just a second. Exhibit B starts on 57. That's a red line version of the urban renewal plan showing the changes that we've made. Exhibit C is mandated by state statute. That is the report to accompany the substantial amendment. And all of the bullet points that you see on page 17, that is the staff report, are mandated by state legislature. Description of the physical, social, economic conditions, reasons why the area was selected, relationship between each project, conditions within the area, and so on down that list. Those same points were covered in 2009. They were covered in 1998 and back into 1990. They carry through. Also described in the report is an analysis of spending authority. Speaking to that point, what is the impact on the taxing districts? And here again, we'll have Elaine coming on to go through the slides on that one. It's also in the report. Farther down, additional exhibits. I mentioned attachment 1 on page 148. Again, that's the one page you're talking about private sector investments we've identified to date that we would like to invest in if we have the capacity. Exhibit D and Exhibit E are historical references. Exhibit D on page 141 is a list of projects identified in 1998, and attachment B on page 142, those were the original projects, 1990, and you see a lot of major public infrastructure projects at that point. So they're included for historical reference. A lot of what we're doing refers to the way this plan was set up in the first place. Changes to the plan need to occur in the same way that the plan was originally adopted. So we don't necessarily want to drop any historical documents. These plans from 1998, 1990, they're not relevant now, but we need to include them for the historical record. It's one reason we go into a lot of detail on the staff reports to try to capture that record. So where are we now in the process? Preparation of the plan amendment. has been done. We are reviewing the plan amendment and the report tonight. And if we have your approval tonight, tomorrow we will convey formal notice to the taxing districts in person. Key reference dates going forward. Public notice of a December 9th City Council public hearing will occur on October 24th. The City of the Dalles Planning Commission review of the substantial amendment and concurrence with the comprehensive plan would take place on November 7th. We will revisit this issue on November 19th with focus especially on the project list, the private sector project list, giving you updates on that one because I just had another one last week. Again, they are building up. December 9th would be the key decision point by the City Council unless City Council needs additional information and defers, and then we would look at January 13th as a secondary date. Project benefits, just for the record, I'll read this paragraph. Expansion of MI will enable the agency and city to make needed improvements to First Street while investing a majority of resulting TIF collection and property rehabilitation grant projects. These projects will result in long-term expansion of the tax base, further described in the substantial amendment report. These investments will help the agency fulfill its mission of eliminating blight in the district. No new debt will be incurred. The district will terminate on schedule in 2029, at which time TIF will be released to the taxing districts. Any unspent TIF revenues will be returned to the districts. I think I've gone through the rest of the attachments already. Just as a reminder, substantial amendment starts on page 20. We'll go there first. And report starts on page 108. Really briefly, through the plan, remember that's a substantial amendment. And I'm just going to hit a few highlights on this one. Definition section is on page 28. It's historical. It's the same structure we have going right from the start. The references to exhibits, including the boundary of the district, are noted on page 31. These will be added upon completion of the document. Rather than throw a whole bunch of exhibits at you, we have enough out there already. The one I would point to that's in the report is on page 115, and that shows the map to demonstrate the fact, no, we are not changing the district boundaries. We wanted to get that in the record right away tonight. Goals and objectives, you've reviewed these. It's probably been 6 or 7 months ago now. That's on page 32 of this first attachment. Probably call out a few of these because it's been a while since we've gone over this material on goals and objectives, and particularly item D, 456. 4 is recognize, maintain awareness of, and when feasible, mitigate the fiscal impact of urban renewal on local tax districts. 5, expand availability of family wage housing, including but not limited to vertical downtown housing and multifamily residential housing. And 6, support the development of public spaces downtown. We really reviewed and over objectives, and again, that's one reason we have to go before City Council. It's a mandatory decision of council when we do stuff like that. Page 33, comprehensive plan consistency. That again goes before the Planning Commission in November. On page 38, you have general project criteria. This has changed very little, if at all, from the original document. You'll see that in the red light version. Projects. This is where the rubber hits the road. Projects are on page 39 to 46. We have reviewed and relisted and updated all of the projects from 2009. What has been accomplished, what hasn't been accomplished, what still needs to be accomplished. And you see various boldface and italicized references. And these continue to be updated. As of, in fact, this last week and the week before that, I'll call attention especially to page 40, the 6th Street Bridge mentioned in the previous report. I think it's about a month ago, September, we received a report, a technical report from Oregon Department of Transportation focusing on the 6th Street Bridge. It's ironic because in 2001, the Urban Renewal District basically resurfaced the First Street Bridge. It is an historic structure, but everything you see, frankly, is not historic. The bollards, the lights, everything else were replaced in 2001. Modified, replaced. They're all higher for one thing. But urban renewal did not touch the underlying structure of that bridge. And therein lies a challenge. According to the ODOT technical report, there are two, quote, intolerable, that's ODOT's word for this, regarding the structure of the bridge and the surface of the bridge. It calls for replacement of the surface, and it calls for doing something about the structure. I am definitely not an engineer, so I have no idea whether that means replacing the structure, but looking at that report, it seems to point in that direction. That is a big surprise to the city, I think. I don't think we were expecting that. Dave is not here. I can't speak for him, but that has not come up in any of our projects up until just this past month. We are scheduling, and actually have already had a couple of meetings with legislative staff about the idea of pursuing a Christmas tree bill on this one. That is the continuing budget reconciliation bill the legislature does just about every session to assist cities with this type of project. It may not be the right vehicle. If the project is expensive enough, we may have to look at a special bill. And we'll have some engineering taking place early in 2025 that's going to try to pin down the cost on this a little bit better.
So is
So
this
I'm-
another thing that we're not sure whether urban renewal is supposed to take care of this problem or the city, or maybe a combination of the two?
As far as, I'll speak, hope I don't speak out of turn, I don't see this being an urban renewal project.
Okay.
Now, that'd be something we would be including in this plan right now. That was gonna be something.
City manager shaking his head no. Yes.
Yep.
But we have to, sorry, Dan Spots was saying he's not an engineer, but you had a little information about, like, there's weight restrictions and things that we might need to be concerned about.
Yeah, so one of the dynamics here is over the past few years, the Sixth Street Bridge has been getting along in age, as we've seen with a lot of bridges in the area. And ODOT has made recommendations to change its weight rating. And ODOT's prior recommendation was to revamp and repair or give the Sixth Street Bridge basically a facelift to extend its useful life. But relatively recently, their recommendation changed to outright replace the bridge. And so that is something the city had not anticipated. And we are, I think, maybe even as early as next month, we'll be putting out an RFP for engineering services to start evaluating that project and really land on even a ballpark for what it would cost to replace. As Mr. Spots mentioned a moment ago, we've had some good contact with different representatives who may be able to support us on that. Looking towards maybe the tail end of mid or tail end of next year to see if we can get some support for that project, but want to do our due diligence and scope it first so we can answer any questions that they may have. This is an excellent example, again, as Mr. Spots noted, of some of those surprises that sometimes crop up when you have millions of dollars invested in infrastructure. And similar to the conversation we'll have later this week with our water master plan, even through careful planning, there are significant infrastructure commitments that the city must make.
But the main reason we're talking about that bridge is because the city is likely not going to have funds to help with First Street or anything else that urban renewal has on its agenda.
Correct. I think the Sixth Street Bridge is a good example of projects that the city needs to commit its funds to. Either that are unexpected as the change in ODOT's recommendation occurred, or looking at the resources that we have amongst our various utilities, street, water, storm, and sewer, and the different funding sources that we have to maintain and enhance those critical services.
Scott Hagee?
Yeah, question, Matthew. I was thinking, and maybe Dan, that a couple months ago, we had been talking about what the city's potential role might be in First Street. And I seem to remember that there was some funding that the city thought they could bring forward to that project. Am I correct, or has that changed?
So I think there's a couple different ways. One, the two that come to mind offhand, and then I'll maybe turn it over to Josh and Dan if I miss something, was with the ad hoc Federal Street Plaza Committee. One of the things that has been discussed is looking at the Federal Street Plaza and not only additions or improvements that may take place on Second Street itself. One of the things we've discussed in a preliminary sense is different bulb outs and whatnot that you could see on Second Street. We've also had some preliminary conversations about improvements that could be made to the First Street parking lots. And that's where we've had some very early on discussion about the sidewalks and whatnot along the city-owned First Street parking lot as maybe an area that there could be some contribution. I want to stress, we don't have those numbers and whatnot, and we'd have to have some additional conversation around that. What's probably more solid is some in-kind staff contributions from the Public Works Department when it comes to project management for First Street, which I believe would have some significant benefits. And maybe I'll turn that over to Mr. Chandler to detail.
Yeah, to that point, our development inspector would be able to assist the agency with his time for construction management. And that would save a considerable amount of money. Otherwise you're looking at an engineer from the firm coming out, basically travel every single day to come out, to only work 4 hours a day. So, having someone here in person would just be an incredible cost savings. And that's already something that the Public Works Department would be committing towards this project. And then to one other point here really quick, to Board Member Denstad's question earlier about the bridge. We're not just bringing the bridge up as in the context of where the city, why the city may not be able to fund First Street. But what Dan is providing here is really just kind of an update of all of our projects through the years. And the Sixth Street Bridge has been listed as an agency project for many years. So it's just, one of those that unfortunately the agency won't be able to finish that project, and the city will be finishing that project.
Thank you, Josh. Chair Long, I might have missed, did we address the question of weight restrictions?
Yeah, I think we did.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So again, to that point, just going through the rest of these projects, Downtown Streetscape is on page 42. Of course, that's First Street. We've gotten a little bit more detail into that one as to what was there before, talking about, particularly about the hollow sidewalks that we have there. And projects continue. The next update is on page 44, the Granada Block redevelopment. This, of course, turned into the recreation, the last stop. And the update that we have here is that project is complete. As of 2 months ago, it was not complete because we didn't have the third parcel conveyed. We do now. Todd Carpenter has acquired that, and we can check that box. The other big area, of course, that we are talking about is the incentive program, development funding agreements. Those fall under the category of property rehabilitation grants and agreements. So this was one of the original projects in here. It is ongoing. And if substantial amendment is approved, we'll be coming back to you later with proposed modifications to the incentive program and development funding agreements to address some areas that we think could use improvement based upon the past year and a half, 2 years of experience. New projects added in 2024. Again, one of the driving reasons for doing the substantial amendment. We have the Salt Commons, Tony's Town and Country building acquisition, demolition, and site rehabilitation. We'll have a brief update on that later on in this meeting under staff reports. Federal Street Plaza. The idea being on Federal Street Plaza, and I think it's important to emphasize, would be urban renewal investment to leverage a larger grant, external grants. We have a preliminary cost estimate on Federal Street Plaza, but it does not reflect the work that the ad hoc committee is doing now. So I don't want to throw a figure out there yet on that one. That needs to wait for the committee's guidance. At the end of the day, we are looking at some potential external grant sources, and they typically do require a local match. So the idea being urban renewal would be a logical source for the local match, but not for the preponderance. We hope not for the preponderance of federal street. That's an ideal opportunity for an outside grant. Few, if any, changes in the amendment until we get to a big one on page 51, and this is where we actually talk about changing the amount of maximum indebtedness. The new figure being $35,262,100. That is the total historic cumulative MI of the agency. Most of it having been committed. So that again is the beginning point. You start from that and look at all the projects that have been done through the course of time, including those that are committed now but not yet expended. And at the end of the day, 2.2 million existing capacity plus requested expansion of 6.1 gives you where we are, about 8.3. You'll see a higher figure, 10 million, but that does not take into account existing expenditures, 1.7, for instance, with the Salt Commons. Those are the major sections of the substantial amendment to the plan. Again, the next packet, Exhibit B on page 57, is the red line version. I'm not going to go through the red line version unless you'd like me to. Okay, thank you. Finally, Exhibit C, page 108, is the report required by legislative statute that accompanies the substantial amendment. This is the fiscal analysis. This is the justification for the projects. It talks about the district boundary, historic projects. It talks about revenue sharing. And again, Elaine is going to be going through her slides because one of the things that occurs in the process of all of this, it triggers revenue sharing going back to the districts. Partway through that 2026, 2029 sequence, there is actually some funding coming back to the districts early. The only other things I'm going to call attention to, page 148, I've mentioned this a couple of times already, the one-page list of potential projects, which we have on hold now. We've identified private sector projects. And the final section on page 149 talks about revenue sharing. And again, we'll turn that over to Elaine for that. With that, I think we are ready for Elaine's slide presentation and for Elaine to join us via Zoom. Elaine, are you there? Hello,
I'm
Elaine.
here.
Introducing
Hello.
Elaine Howard Consulting. Elaine, take it away.
Great, thank you. And I am joined tonight by Nick Popinuk, who has done all of the financial analysis. So if we get into questions that I cannot answer, I'll call on Nick to jump in and help support me. Substantial amendments are even more difficult than an initial urban renewal plan because we have to look back and figure out what money you've spent and how much you have left, and how much you have left always varies from month to month because you're spending money. So it just makes things a little more fluid and a little more difficult to explain. So if this were a new plan, it's an easier financial analysis to explain. So do you want me to share my slide deck? Okay, you've got yours. Thank you. So I've been working on this amendment with Nick and Ali from Tiberius Solutions, and of course with your very competent staff who are represented in the meeting tonight. Next. I'll go through the process, your plan and report review. I won't go into too much of that because Dan did a great job of going over a lot of that. The financial overview, and then next steps and a potential motion for your resolution. Next. An urban renewal plan amendment is adopted through each step. You have to allow public input if anybody comes and wants to testify. At any of these steps, we always encourage that you allow testimony at each step if you can. So the first is the agency meeting that we're having tonight, and then you do have another briefing update in November. And at the meeting tonight, hopefully you will make a decision on whether or not to send the documents out for this formal public review. That public review is sending it to the taxing districts for a 45-day consult and confer process, to the county, where you also have to make a presentation. They do not have a vote, but the statute does require that you make a formal presentation to them. You have to have your planning commission review the plan for conformance with your comprehensive plan, and then a city council hearing and vote. For that city council hearing, you have to provide a notice to all citizens. I believe you're doing that to residents of the city, and that is projected to go out October 24th if you indeed decide to move this forward. Next. So as Dan said, there are two documents that the city council would review for a potential amendment. One is your urban renewal plan amendment that updates your goals and objectives, updates your projects into categories of completed and then future projects, increases the maximum indebtedness, and then does general updating of the plan amendment to bring it up to the current standards. The picture that we see here is one of your completed projects. It is the Sunshine Meal Project, and you can see a before and after of that project, which is on a really key intersection, visual impact to the city, and a really well done project. Next slide. So for the future, it would be continuation of your downtown property rehab projects, which is formally called your incentive program and development funding agreements. One of those potential projects could be the Sigmund's Oak Hotel. It has received Main Street grant for facade restoration, and then urban renewal request is on hold for upper story residential. Next slide. So these projects that say new for 2024 are specific projects, but above that is continuation of that building improvement projects in the plan, where you're working with building owners to try to bring the use of properties up so that you can get more taxes off of those properties and have a useful life of those buildings. And then the new projects would be your Basalt Commons project, the Tony's Town and Country Building acquisition, demolition, and site rehab, the First Street reconstruction project, and then the Federal Street Plaza, again, as Dan said, to use mostly as a match to try to get other funding sources for that really key plaza connecting place within all of the other work that you've done in your urban renewal area. Next slide. Past and future projects, just wanted to preview a couple of those. So your Granada Theater, where you did some work on the roof and the marquee. Next slide. The Commodore 2 building, before and after of that. When I first started working with the Dalles many years ago, that was in the shape of the top slide. And when you come into town and look at that building now, it's really a nice feature for your downtown. Next slide.
Elaine?
Yes.
You forgot about the pigeons.
No, it was such a mess before.
It was.
So the second document that City Council would review is the report on the plan. They don't actually adopt that document, but that document provides the technical analysis to support the findings in the ordinance that they would consider for adoption. It provides those existing conditions in the area that allow you to say that the area is still has blighting findings for the area. Blighting findings just means that blight still exists within the area, and we are able in the report to make that finding. And then it goes through all of the financial projections. In terms of blight, Dan talked about First Street reconstruction and the bridge problems. And then this also shows one of your buildings that could be put back into a better use for your city, the last stop facade. Maximum indebtedness, as Dan said, these numbers look a little different from what he just talked to you about. And I think that's just because you have committed to another project as we've been putting these numbers together. So the net TIF, or the net amount of tax increment revenues that you would be getting from the county assessor from the analysis here until the end of the district in fiscal year in 2029 would be about 8.5 million. The maximum indebtedness would be increased to 35,262,100. And the remaining MI capacity, and some of this may have been committed now, but it's around $11 million. And as Dan said, I think he's talking about a number more around $8 million, given the other commitment. So the projected increase in your maximum indebtedness is the 6.1 million. And again, as Dan said, and I think this is a really important point, the increase in maximum indebtedness by statute now, using this inflation factor, is only allowed once. So if you did increase the area's maximum indebtedness now, this is the last time you are able to do that. And it is projected that your district would end in fiscal year end 2029. Next slide. These are the estimated project allocations that would use up that full maximum indebtedness. And again, the agency would look for a local match for the plaza. The year of expenditure costs just mean that all of these wouldn't be paid in 2024. Those costs will go up a little bit over that time frame to fiscal year in 2029, just due to inflationary costs. Next slide. In your report, we have a number of tables that detail the impacts to taxing districts. So the first set of tables are the impacts of the amendment only. So the impacts only of that potential $6.1 million of maximum indebtedness. So on these slides, you can see that fiscal year in 2025 shows no impacts. That's of this increase only. You do have impacts there, as we'll see on other sites, but that's of your existing maximum indebtedness. This is the projected impact of the new maximum indebtedness authority. And you can see in fiscal year in 2026, it's a little more than half of the year following that. And that is because in fiscal year in 2026, you are projected to still use up some of that capacity from your existing maximum indebtedness. So you'll, and our third set of pictures of these impacts will show that fully. So the impacts of the amendment, I know the representative of the fire and rescue was asking, well, what are those projected impacts for us of the amendment? It's $742,953 are the projected impacts to the fire district, the county about 1.5 million, and you can see all of the other taxing districts there, in including the city of the Dalles itself. Next slide. This shows those impacts of the amendment on the education districts. And as we've talked about before, this doesn't mean those education districts will be getting less money. It means that the state school fund and the college, community college fund will not be receiving these revenues, but they fund your local college and your local school district on formula allocations on the local school districts. It's a per pupil allocation that does not go down as a direct result of urban renewal. And for the community college, it's based on number of classes, students in classes and classes taken. Next slide. And we can come back to any of these in your questions. So these just show if there is no amendment and this district just uses up your remaining maximum indebtedness, what those projected impacts would be to your general government taxing jurisdictions. So you can again see in fiscal year end 2026, that's a much lower number, and that's because you don't need that full year's worth of tax increment revenue to reach your maximum indebtedness. You would need a partial year of that revenue to reach it. So if this amendment to increase the maximum indebtedness does not go forward, this is what those final impacts are projected to be for your general government taxing jurisdictions. Next slide. This again shows education, and again we know that they're backfilled, so these are indirect impacts to the general funds that are made up to fund those education taxing jurisdictions. Next slide. These put those two numbers together. So it's showing the addition of your existing maximum indebtedness plus the $6.1 million of new maximum indebtedness, and what that total impact would be on the taxing jurisdictions. And you can see that starting in fiscal year end 2026, that impact is the same each year. It does not increase. And that is because if you do a substantial amendment to increase the maximum indebtedness, revenue sharing comes into effect, and revenue sharing for you will cap those revenues to the Urban Renewal Agency in fiscal year in 2026, and all increased revenues after that will go to the taxing jurisdictions. So there is a limited amount of money that the Urban Renewal Agency will get starting in fiscal year end 2026 if the amendment is passed. Next slide. This shows the same full impact to the education districts, again, indirect impact. Next slide. This shows the projected revenue sharing amounts with the taxing jurisdictions as a result of a substantial amendment to increase the maximum indebtedness. And it shows how those amounts increase every year because the limit is now on the Urban Renewal Agency, and they cannot receive over a specified amount, and all taxes over that will go to the taxing jurisdictions. You can see in the top slide, it says mandatory revenue sharing. That's the revenue sharing required by statute. And then there's voluntary revenue sharing. Voluntary revenue sharing just occurs in that last year, and that is because you will reach that full maximum indebtedness in that year. You will underlevy that amount of money, and the taxing districts will receive that money in the future because you have underlevied or asked for less money in that final year because you don't need that full amount to reach your maximum indebtedness. Next slide. Dan went through these next steps and schedule. So we move forward here if we get the resolution passed by the agency. So potentially if you pass that, the taxing districts will receive their consultant confer letters tomorrow, a planning commission meeting November 7th, a county briefing to be set up, a city council hearing, and potential vote on December 9th. Next slide. This is the potential motion. Staff recommendation in your staff report is to move to adopt the resolution directing staff to commence the substantial amendment process for making changes to the Columbia Gateway Urban Renewal Plan. And that is, we can either take this down and have discussion, or if anybody wants to look at those slides with the numbers on them, we can leave this up so we can go back and refer to those slides.
What I'd like to see is a sample, like for 2025, the amount of money the fire district will forfeit, if you will,
Mhm.
if this doesn't pass, and the amount, if it does pass, that'll give me a year showing me the additional amount in a given year.
Okay, if we can go back to slide 13.
Sorry, well, you want to see a with and without, right? Like 2026, without the amendment, we're gonna contribute, let's say X, and with it, you're gonna contribute X plus whatever.
I think you're right, and I can hardly see the numbers are too small from this distance. So
There, this information is in your report too. So this just shows with of the amendment only. So I don't think this is the best number. Let's go down to slide 16. Okay. This shows your full impact. So Mid-Columbia Fire and Rescue, if the amendment passes, your full impact would be around $214,000 each year until fiscal year end 2029, where it reduces because the agency won't need the full amount of tax increment revenues.
that's
So
if it passes. If it doesn't pass,
yeah,
let's look at 2026 instead of 2025.
In the report also, starting on page 126 of Exhibit C.
Okay, so go to slide 14, please, Dan or Paula.
Josh is driving on us.
Josh, sorry, I had two good guesses. So if this does not pass in fiscal year in 2024, you'll still have the $214,000 impact. And in 2026, you'll have something like the 72,000 that will be the final year of TIF collections. So that is our projection. And it should be close to that. So it's not the full amount. You won't need, the agency should not need the full amount to be able to reach their maximum indebtedness in fiscal year in 2026.
So 2025 is going to cost the district the same regardless if it passes or not, but it's going to be forced to sunset a lot sooner. So in 2026, we would get a substantial savings.
Yes. 140,000.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Curious if there's any other districts like Parks and Rec, or probably not the port so much, but other districts that would be concerned with increasing the MI and continuing. My understanding as an example, and correct me if I'm wrong, the fire district would be concerned because that's the FTE equivalent of X number of EMT or firefighters or something, or equipment. Is that?
Well, I guess if it's okay with these two guys, I can go into what I think is the overall board's concern, and I can expand on what a little bit, since they sent me down here, I'm going to expand on what my concern is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can we take
So now's a good time to do
down?
that, or?
What was that, Elaine?
Could we take the screen down, then I can see you? Yeah, thank you.
Before we jump into that, Dan, you spoke with every taxing district. Is there anyone else who had expressed concerns? That's, I just want to get that answer before we delve.
Thinking that over, no.
Okay.
No, we've been doing outreach and no. We'll continue to do that, but not so far.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, well, go ahead.
So I believe that it's each board member is probably a little bit different, but listening to comments and stuff, there's a strong desire. I mean, we have a bond running right now for the fire district, and we bought a whole lot of new equipment with it. And one of the side effects is everybody figures we're rolling into dough. But there's a strong desire not to go for a bond when that one's paid off. We kind of paid off the fire station and immediately went for another bond. And their desire is not to go to the taxpayers again. And so they're kind of holding on to the money to make sure that there's a desire to build another fire station and make sure that we can replace equipment as needed and everything. And I'm not opposed to this idea of not going to the taxpayers for another bond. I think the fire district can get a bond sometimes a lot easier than other taxing districts. We have good support from the community, and I don't want to lose that support. I'll bring up the high school bond that did not pass. And I guess the college is looking for a bond. And I bring that up because they are not going to receive any revenue. And this is something I learned as a rookie politician, that they get more money from these data centers. It doesn't really help them. So if everybody like the fire district and everybody else keeps going out for bonds and stuff like that, I don't think the average income in the Dalles is really jumping up. So you're asking a lot from the taxpayers if you got a lot of bonds that are happening at the same time. So I think it reduces the chance of the high school passing their bond if everybody else has got a bond going. So I'm for the fire district not asking for another bond. But it's created what I feel is a very, very urgent situation because of the paramedic shortage. We're not competing. We are, following the contract and everything, but our paramedics are leaving. And that's a big problem, an urgent problem to me. And if I'm going to, hopefully get people to understand that needs to be fixed, if there's revenue that's going to be continually pulled from the district, they're going to look at the overall picture. Well, can we, get more paramedics, or are we going to have to continue to let them all leave and try to run this agency without them? And I'm not for that, because in my background, to me, this is a priority. And I realize most of the community doesn't realize what kind of a situation is occurring. Nobody wants bad public relations for their agency. But I'm afraid we're going to wind up with some bad public relations if we don't fix this problem. Starting Sunday morning at 8 o'clock, starts a shift. At 8 o'clock Monday morning, that shift ended. The number of paramedics on during that 24 hours here was 0. And if you're talking about experience, knowledge, and training, that's a problem. And when you go to turn on your lights and they don't turn on, that's a priority all of a sudden. If you go to turn on your faucet and the water doesn't flow, that's a priority all of a sudden. When responders come to your emergency, their knowledge, their training, their skill is now a big priority. And people have told me this with facial expressions for years and years. And there may be people in here that have experienced respiratory distress, but you can imagine if you have respiratory distress, you have a different set of priorities all of a sudden. So this is part of the reason this is a big priority to me. If anybody can help me fix this problem and you guys can continue with your urban renewal, that's fine. But you understand why I'm trying to do everything I can to fix this problem. And that's my personal reason I'm not for any more money being taken from the fire district. Now there's, like I said, I'm okay with trying to not continue to go to the taxpayers for a bond and everything. I think there's good rationale for that. But right now, today, I think the water main I keep bringing up is a priority. The 6th Street Bridge, the irony of the 6th Street Bridge is all of a sudden everybody knows that there was a problem when that was fixed after the 96 flood. And, well, that's hindsight. Well, it's ironic to me because it's not hindsight. I knew that problem existed way before ODOT came in and said, hey, there's a problem. Because the emphasis was on making it look nice, not making it functional. And I knew that a long time ago. And I know that this problem that Mid-Columbia Fire and Rescue is dealing with is going to be something everybody here is going to learn about if we don't figure out how to fix it. So I'm not using hindsight. I saw this problem coming, and now, unbeknownst to most people in this town, it's getting to be critical. So, that's why I'm getting all kind of emphasizing, priorities and the money flow and everything. There's urgent things. I brought up urgency. There's urgent things that I agree with the city needs to do, and the bridge is one of them, and the water main is one of them. But there's few things that have the urgency of what I'm talking about right now. Thank you.
Yes. Clarifying question. So I have a clarifying question on that one. And just want to clarify that I'm speaking as a community member, not in my capacity as an employee of the hospital. My question would be if these funds would impact the ability to retain staff, or if that money actually comes from a contract with the county for MCF&R.
Well, as far as I know, the county doesn't contribute any money to MCF&R for anything. Now, I can't guarantee that if this goes down, that the rest of the board and the management and stuff is going to go, oh, okay, now we're going to compete for paramedics. I can't guarantee that at all. If I had a real strong voice with that board, things would be different. The reason I got on that board is because I could see there's a problem. They don't agree with me that there's a problem. So am I going to be able to convince them because this goes down that we've got to get on the stick and get this done? I can't guarantee that at all. I think that one of the things the hospital is aware of is the side effect of not having enough paramedics is they don't want to take people from the local hospital to Portland. If you only have one paramedic on duty and you send him to Portland, now you don't have any in town. So there's a number of things that have been kind of popping up that kind of tell the story, but I wish I had the brains to fix this problem. I wouldn't have needed to get on the board if I could have just walked in and said, here's what you got to do to fix this problem.
Counselor Richardson.
Thanks. I want to make a couple, hopefully brief comments. First of all, I want to say, well, I appreciate you being clear and direct and telling us your concerns, 100%. By way of bona fides, years ago, I actually got my EMTB and did a small amount of time volunteering on the other coast. And I take your point. Yeah, when you show up with lights and someone's called to you and you show up, that's important and that's a priority, and it should be. Anyway, I don't need to belabor that. I also point out these two things are unrelated, but I think worth carrying in mind at the same time. One is that we are asking for some money, and it's real money from the district, from the fire district, right? If this amendment were to go through, it's $742. It's $750,000. That's real money over 4 years. 100%. Yes, it is. At the same time, we have the first Google data center coming near to operations and the second one following close behind. And I guess I will say, correct me if I'm wrong, if anyone else has done the math, but the conservative estimate that a few of us have been bouncing around is that Parks will be getting $250,000 a year bump from that, starting in about 25 or 26 from both data centers. Fire district gets about 800. And I think that's pretty conservative. So, and the reason that all the districts get that is because 3 years ago, a group of us really argued and lobbied for that, had a number of conversations and said it sounds kind of, I don't know, Pollyanna or naive to be like, we're all in it together, but we are all in it together. And we put our money where our mouth was and said, let's share the wealth on this. When these data centers get built, let's make sure everybody gets bumped up from it. And now we're very close to that. And, there's costs to Google. It's a big building and there's other costs, but there's benefits. And one of the benefits is going to be real money really coming in. So I hope that eases some concern. I think the fire district is going to stands to get, a very real amount of money for the next 15 or 20 years, which is, probably as far as in the future as we are likely to be able to see. The city does too, the county, everybody. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Thanks for sharing yours so clearly. I really do appreciate it.
Part of my point is when I say most of the agencies need to quit asking for bonds because they can survive on the data center. And I'm not here to advocate for the school, but I understand now the data centers aren't going to help them much. So maybe the educational thing, we should allow them to get some bonds passed and everybody else survive on the data center money. And I think the fire district can do that. The problem I'm looking at right now is today, not a year from today. And the other thing that, during my career here in the Dalles, we've never been adequately trained or equipped for hazardous materials. And that needs to change. The explosion at the tie plant was a hazardous material incident. And that ended the career of a firefighter paramedic. He's never coming back to work because of that injury. And so, I see all this stuff from a little different angle. And when I got on the fire district, I didn't think I was, on it for the urban renewal board. I got sent down here because nobody else really wanted to do it, right?
Well, I appreciate you doing it. 100%.
So Walt, would you say that, did the fire board give you instructions about how they would like you to vote, or did they leave it up to you to make a personal choice?
No, they definitely have given me instructions several times, and it's unanimous. And the statement is, and I was in on this. I mean, I wasn't like the outstanding no vote on this. I was like, yeah. And I guess being on here, I understand everybody else's priorities, and my priorities and other board members are different, and that's okay. My priorities with some of the people on this board are different, and that's okay. But they were very clear. We want urban renewal to sunset. The sooner, the better. And that's unanimous.
Does anyone else have anything they want to share, like from their agency, to make sure everyone represents? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Long. Yeah, this is a difficult decision. I'm personally not thrilled about the choice that we have in front of us around First Street, but here we are. We've got over $1 million spent on this project. We've got a lot of staff time and effort, and I think a deal is a deal. As I've looked for a silver lining in this, I think nothing happens in a vacuum. There's some really exciting developments happening with the Mill Creek Greenway and the Federal Street Plaza. I think I'm a proud user of the Riverfront Trail as well and used to be on that board. I love that feature in our community. And I really do think, as I've looked for ways to feel better about the First Street project, I think this does present a really good opportunity to create a safe and attractive and convenient connection from Riverfront Trail to the Federal Street Plaza, as well as hopefully eventually the Mill Creek Greenway, to the Federal Street Plaza. So I think that's good for everybody. I'm going to be a yes because I think we're going to stand with urban renewal and its mission and our amazing downtown businesses. I see folks in the audience tonight who have either had or have great projects that have really benefited the whole community. When our community and our downtown businesses are thriving, our tax base goes up. That's good for everybody. That's good for parks. More system development charges, more development means that's good for parks. And I know Urban Renewal has stood with parks before, with Thompson Park on a couple different projects, as well as Mill Creek Greenway. So I think this MI helps our mission of the urban renewal. I think it helps our downtown business community, and I think ultimately it helps parks. And I was not in that place to begin in these conversations. So met with a lot of people, talked to a lot of people, talked to our board, did a ton of research, and eventually came around to the fact that I do think this is the best decision to move forward. And so Parks is going to stand with urban renewal and with the city and with our downtown business community and support the mission of urban renewal to fund these great projects and revitalize First Street.
Scott Hagee.
Yeah, so just I would say the county, Dan and Josh came to our meeting, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, and we had a discussion about it, and we were split in a way, not split in a way. So we had basically one of our commissioners not in favor, two of them in favor, and our staff was generally not overly in favor either. So I don't know how to vote, but I think that if I look at the numbers, it's 2-1. But I just want to make it clear that it wasn't unanimous in favor. So I just want to make people aware of that.
Thank you. Is there anyone else has any questions or comments? Stacy?
Yeah, I can add, and while admittedly, Port of the Dalles is a much smaller component of the group compared to many of you, we certainly do take the business of business here in the Dalles very seriously. And while at least me personally, I was not super excited about this idea some months ago, and particularly because it felt like over 20 years, yes, we may have agreed to a project, but the project isn't what it was. And I think if we were to talk about it again today, that may not have been the area we may have wanted to focus on. But at last, we're here where we are. And I think, for safety reasons, for aging water reasons, and for potential of perhaps the front side of the Dalles that faces 84 looking more attractive, if that can help, I think that's good for business. And so for that reason, I think I would be supporting as well this evening.
Anyone else? Okay.
I just want to say thank you as a community member on the board to all of the people that shared their opinions and everybody who engaged, even though there was disagreement. I think it's really encouraging to be in a space where voices are heard regardless of whether or not they agree, and that there's communication happening that is still respectful, and that both sides of the street are being represented. I think it's great. I am going to fall back on, oddly enough, this letter. I was a little bit undecided myself. It's a large amount of money, and a lot of these agencies could probably utilize that money in different ways, like Walt spoke about earlier. But as someone who is a prior business owner in the Dalles in this district, I think it's very important that we listen to what our business owners need from us. And so I also will be voting yes.
Any other comments? McLaughlin?
Well, after listening to all of the input, I have concluded that the passage of this resolution is imperative to complete or finalize the mission, the original mission of Urban Renewal Agency. So I'm in favor of saying yes to this process.
Anyone else have comments? Yes.
Yeah, I'll have to say that and at the last meeting I was with Walt. I've been like teetering on this for weeks. months, even like with the education that Dan Spatz and Josh has given us. But I think in that timeline, I've been able to research other funding sources and things like that because I've been concerned about the fire district and things like that. I've also been concerned with some of the money that Parks and Rec and other districts are going to lose from this, or foresee as being lost. But I think that there's other revenues coming in to the city of the Dalles. The Google money is one thing, and it's a substantial portion. But I think that because of things like that, and because of the Dalles, we talked about this on the Federal Street Plaza, that like the Dalles, we deserve something nice, right? I hate to say it, and it's simplistic, but because it's simplistic, but I think that it'll be an important final addition to put a a finishing touch on urban renewal as it sunsets over the next few years. So I've changed my mind a little bit after the discussion. So I much appreciate the discussion, and some of that research that I've had is with like our city manager and other city staff to figure out what's the real, like what's the bottom line on this for us to take care of some of the infrastructure improvements and things like that we need around the city. And finding out about the 6th Street Bridge was like another reason I was like very on the fence about this, because those things they're going to have to come from somewhere. So I don't know. Anyways, I know it's long-winded, but
No, it's good. When everybody's Dan, did you want to add anything else? I think we got everybody, but
Thank you guys. I appreciate your comments too. And look, it's messy and expensive, and maybe it's a simplistic example, but it's like, this is the house we got, we inherited. That's what it is.
yeah, I just want to say thank you to all the board members and all the thought that you put into this. This is a really great process, and that hasn't always happened on every committee. So kudos. I'm sorry, McLaughlin.
The letter that I read tonight has an impact because, as you said, it comes from the downtown business, and it was so well constructed, and so that had a major reason for my decision.
Okay. And just to be clear for everybody at home, this is a email that we got from Todd Carpenter, and that'll be in the packet as well. Okay, so this happened when we tried to make the agenda, but what has happened is we morphed from the urban renewal plan substantial amendment down into the resolution. So how would staff like to handle this? Shall we vote on the substantial amendment as an action, or is that an action item? We need to send that on to council, correct?
The motion would be to adopt resolution number 24-004.
Okay, so we can jump down to that.
Right.
Okay, all right. So does anyone want to make a motion?
I can do that.
Thank you.
I make a motion to direct staff to proceed with adoption process. The agency board directs staff to proceed consistent with the provisions of ORS Chapter 457, Urban Renewal, to commence the process of approving a substantial amendment to the plan, to add projects, revive the goals and objectives, add property under 20% cumulative of the original boundary, increase the maximum indebtedness, and generally update the plan in accordance with the Columbia Gateway Urban Renewal Plan Amendment. It's attached to the part of the resolution as Exhibit A, and the report on the Columbia Gateway Urban Renewal Plan Amendment, it's attached to and made part of this resolution as Exhibit B.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second. This is Stacy Coburn.
Thank you. So I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed?
Oh,
Any abstention?
I oppose.
Okay.
That was
sorry.
Scott.
Yes, Scott said aye on the yes, and Walt said no. And no abstentions. Okay. All right, so the motion passes.
Thank you, everyone.
Yep.
If I had one closing comment, it would be full court press on the private investment side of this, because that is where the long-term value is going to be. I think that Mr. Carpenter expressed it in his letter. Multiply that by other projects, returning tax value. And finally, also appreciation to Commissioner Hagee. I think I misspoke when I said no, there's no other opposition. There is concern, of course, from Wasco County on this. They take a hit. Didn't quite hear your question, but yes, correct. 2-1 from the county.
Okay, thank you. So now we're going to do action number 8 action item, the surplus of agency property.
Yeah, thank you. I think now that the hard part is over, I just wanted to touch on something really quick that typically shows up in a city council consent agenda, which for those following along, that's typically routine work is completed with a consent agenda, meeting minutes, things of routine nature here. But wanted to bring this up. And this is the surplus of agency property. So as we know, in November 2023, the agency completed the demo and hazardous abatement of the Tony's building site. This was completed with a contract with Connell Construction and Demolition. After they finished up, Stantec and Consulting Services performed a cultural resource review, which complied with an archaeological review with SHPO. The site's now leveled and secure with fencing. Dan's going to touch base on the RFEI that we have. He's going to provide us with an update on that after this. During this demolition process, agency staff coordinated the removal of a couple building features, including the iconic Tony's Town and Country sign and a historic mechanical pulley system in the basement. These items were carefully packed and now they're stored on city property. While there have been informal discussions regarding what to do with this material, agency staff believe that these items are no longer needed by the agency. So before disposing of any surplus items, the agency must adhere to local contract review board rules, which outline various disposal methods, including intergovernmental transfers, auctions, donations. This practice, as I mentioned, is a common practice for the Dalles City Council and typically included in the consent agenda. However, due to the unique history of this property, as well as the fact that this isn't a very common practice, staff elected to bring this in front of you in the event there's any additional discussion needed. So the city is actually planning on a local auction coming up soon. I use that word lightly. Basically, they are looking into recently at the last city council meeting, the city surplus the former Griffith Motors auto sign, which is at the corner of 3rd and Jefferson Street. As you know, this is the property that the agency and the city are working together to redevelop into a public parking lot. So the goal there is the city plans on opening it up for some type of auction type of process, and initially opening it up to those individuals locally based. So therefore, targeting individuals in the 97058 zip code. I believe that's still the plan, or Wasco County as a whole. So in the event that agency approves for the surplus of this material here from the Tony's building site, we'll try to tag on with the city to try to do a collaborative and reach out and try to locally source our disposal of the Tony's building sign, as well as another sign that was on the property. I think it used to be Tammy's Florals back in maybe 2012. And then also, as I mentioned, there's this really cool old leather and metal pulley system that was in the basement of the Tony's building site. We believe that had something to do with the former automotive use that was there in the 20s. So I have provided a photo of both of the signs. This was, of course, before they were removed, and this was a Google image of 2018. Those are the two signs. We do not have a picture of the pulley system. As I mentioned, they are crated up on one of the city's properties. So with this, what the next step would be board alternatives. It would be staff's recommendation to approve the surplus of agency property as described. Another option would be declining this and directing staff accordingly to move forward with doing something else with this property. Yep.
Can I make a suggestion that we hold on this until after the Federal Street Plaza speaks with the architect? I believe it's in 2 days or tomorrow, to see if maybe this sign could be incorporated in some way in that design and keep the history in the same location.
Yeah. Yeah, we could do that.
So you table it tonight.
Yeah, we could table it. And just heads up, it's not in the shape that it is. It was definitely pulled apart in pieces. But yes, we can table it. That's how the rest of the board feels. Happy to do that.
Any concerns about that? Okay, we'll table it and add it to the agenda next time.
Okay, sounds good.
Update. Okay, board member comments or questions? Anyone?
Sorry, briefly. Did I hear, Dan, you're going to go over the Tony's Lot RFEI tonight? Is that right? Did I miss that?
Very briefly, sir.
Okay.
Very briefly.
So that was my question. And then my comment is, I believe I read in the voluminous documents in advance of this meeting that you guys will be coming back, or maybe you made a comment that coming back with some suggested updates to the incentive program.
That's correct.
Okay. I have a comment about that. When you do, personally, I'd like to have some conversation or propose that we put in a sort of more formal method, some sort of return on investment calculation. So I mean, this is public money. We're trying to be thoughtful and careful and also support our entrepreneurs, but it'd be nice to have some ROI.
Exactly. And the draft that we prepared, it's been 6 months, probably 6 or 7 months ago. We put all of that on hold pending this discussion.
Yep.
But ROI is one of the topics we go into in some depth on that, with some different ideas on how to approach that, how to justify that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
City Manager Klebs.
If I may make just a quick comment, I really like that idea about having a conversation at the ad hoc committee about the sign for Federal Street Plaza potentially. I think it would still involve the agency transferring ownership of that sign in that scenario to the city. And so I think, and then maybe Jonathan, if he's still listening, can chime in. I think it still may be beneficial to surplus the sign, even if it's ultimately disposed of to the city in effect for the Federal Street Plaza. And that way, if it works or doesn't work, the sign is still surplus and we could move forward in a different way if the ad hoc committee goes a different direction. Does that make sense?
That's super helpful. Yes.
Yeah, so we're just surplusing it, but no specific instructions.
The disposition of the sign is what staff can do next. And with that kind of consensus or input from the agency, staff can work on that, either disposing it to the city for, potential use in the Federal Street Plaza, or disposing of it through the city's general process for the other sign that we talked about on Jefferson Street.
Okay. So before I ask for a motion about
Councilwoman?
Yes.
Oh,
Carl.
I can just jump in if there were any questions on the issue of surplusing. And I tend to agree with the city manager. It makes sense for the agency to surplus the personal property that we're talking about. If there is a desire or an intent by the agency board to transfer that to the city of the Dalles, that's certainly something that can be done. It would be done typically by intergovernmental agreement, especially if we want to apply it to a purpose, like a specific purpose, like the Federal Street Plaza. And that's certainly something that we can explore. Although, since it's on the agenda and it has been presented here tonight, and we have, I think, a full board here as well, it would be a great time if the board wants to reconsider surplusing it tonight to do that.
Okay, great. So before I jump to that, Councilor McLaughlin had his hand up, and I'm not sure what
I was going to just point out that you were leaving for a fire board, but I assumed that you had left, but I just wanted everyone to know you didn't leave early for any other reason.
Well, if I could get there in time, but I don't think
I got you. Okay, so never mind.
Okay, so does anyone want to make a motion about surplusing the property?
Chair Long, I
Yes.
move to approve the surplus of agency property as described.
Have a second?
McLaughlin will second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Can't tell who's on there, but I didn't hear him say anything. He probably went back to his meeting, but yep, he's gone.
Okay.
Okay, staff comments and project updates.
Just a few. Thank you, Chair Long. Status report, first off, it's not quite urban renewal, but it's very complimentary. Our EPA brownfield grant, $500,000 to the city of the Dalles. We're working through some final contract language on that one, and we anticipate starting that probably in November. The way these federal grants work out, I want to leave a little bit of leeway on that one, but as with urban renewal, we have projects on hold for that, and look forward to taking care of those. On the Tony's RFEI, the request for expressions of interest, we had 3 diverse, very distinct visions for that project. I hesitate to go into any further description of those pending the first meeting of the advisory committee, which is going to be on November 12th. That's the earliest date that we could find agreement on the advisory committee members. If I said anything about the projects, a small enough town, you would immediately know probably who's doing what there. And some of the information attached to some of those proposals is proprietary. So I want to be careful about that. It speaks, however, to the level of thought that goes into this, because we have cost analysis, we have budgets, we have a lot of work and a lot of thoughtful attention reflected in those responses. The members of the advisory committee, Chair Long, Commissioner Hagee, Andrea Kloss is the manager of the Port of the Dalles, Hannah Mapes with Studio Fit. She is on the Main Street board, and her shop is right across the street from the Tony site. City Manager Cleaves, Mr. Chandler, and myself. And that first meeting will be on the 12th of November, and I look forward to keeping you posted after that. Proceeding into due diligence, a careful review of those projects, and the question of how do we release details to the public. I want to defer to the advisory committee on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That's it from
That's
me
it?
on staff reports.
Okay. Then I'm going to adjourn this meeting.
Yeah.
Hmm? Did it?
Yeah, right.
I hope so too. So